Good morning, everyone, and welcome to the Infrastructure Committee this morning. Just give you a brief overview of what we're going to look at today. We're going to take some oral evidence from the Department for Infrastructure on graduated driver's licences. We're going to receive an oral briefing from RIAs on planning decisions and then consider 3 proposals, SL1s, for statutory rules that are subject to assembly procedure and 1 not subject to assembly procedure. So for those who are in attendance in the public gallery, you can use mobile devices through your Wi-Fi connection. They should be muted, and obviously, as usual, you're not allowed to take any recordings or photography in this room. And if members are content, we will proceed through the agenda. Apologies. Okay, so Deputy Chair is, I know, is in London, and he's going to try and join us virtually for some of the session today. And I think Justin might be trying to make his way in. But is there anything else anyone has? Okay. Declarations of interest. Just to remind members, they're obliged to declare any relevant interests. You can do so now if you've done it already. That's absolutely fine. If there's anything that comes up in the context of discussions this morning, you can declare it when you get to it. In terms of chairperson's business, the first one I don't want to dwell on, but I want to at least make reference to it, and if anyone else wants to comment on it, they can. It's a first. We are having officials in regarding graduated driver's licenses this morning. We did have a session on this last week. It's just for me to note that there was no formal briefing attached or provided to the committee ahead of this session. I think that's pretty poor form that they managed to get FAQs up on their website, get a presser up there, but they didn't actually tell the committee or give us any indication as to what they're going to say or any format regarding GDLs. And you can comment on that if you want. Other than that, I'm happy to park it there and move on.
Sure, I would just concur with that. I think there seemed to be a lot of information provided to media outlets well over a week ago now, and the committee seemed to be bypassed really, which I find disappointing. Having been on this committee for quite a number of years now, 2 years, it is disappointing, the lack of information. I think it's definitely worth highlighting it.
Yep.
Maybe we can express our disappointment as well as a committee.
I think we could, if committees agreed, we could certainly write back to the department and express our disappointment that we didn't have a formal briefing prior to the officials attending. That's pretty standard. I can certainly see the reasons for it in that they suddenly announced it on the media last week, but it's not standard that we've taken witnesses without without a formal briefing. That notwithstanding, I still remain of the view that actually any policy intent that cuts down on driving deaths in Northern Ireland is to be welcomed, and I think that is the committee's view. But this issue, and we'll get into it with GDLs in more detail later, is about the process with how this was done rather than the policy intent. Chair, Michael.
Chair. Can I just check, Chair, that committees agreed to write to the department to express its disappointment at the lack of a paper?
Agreed. Thank you. Next is potholes. I know that's going to be a big surprise for everyone. If you're in the chamber yesterday, the Minister was in answering an urgent oral on this. And I think every committee member more or less got to speak on that. Regarding that, I would like to, I did see a presser today from the Minister saying that she's going to try and spend some more money on potholes for the remainder of the year. That's because I was on the department's website. I don't think that was flagged up to us, but that is sitting there. I would like the committee to consider writing to the Minister, trying to ascertain what information the department has on the number of potholes in Northern Ireland. I think that should be split down by council area. I'd like to know what the budgets are in terms of roads maintenance by council area. An assessment of the department's longevity of temporary repairs. Somebody did ask a question about this yesterday. I don't know, was it you, Peter, who was asking about temporary repairs?
Quality.
Quality, yeah,
of temporary
yeah.
repairs, yeah.
Quality of temporary repairs. How long is temporary repair meant to last? What's the purpose of it? When does it get filled in, etc. The costs of filling in a pothole. I know that's a very general thing. How do they work that out? And how is that done? I'm aware that DFI don't have the number of staff that they would have had a long time ago. Most of this work is carried out by contractors that DFI employ. Those are my questions. Harry.
Just if you could also add into what Peter had said, or what you said Peter had said, if there's a change in method of how the temporary repairs are carried out, because they really don't seem to be near as durable as they used to.
Yeah.
You got a temporary repair like a few years ago. It did last a few years now if you get a few weeks out of it.
Yep.
You know, so if we could check the method, is there any changes in the method?
Yeah, no, that's fine. I mean, one other thing was just you're mentioning that to me is, I don't know whether anyone asked about the quality assurance regarding these. I think somebody did, and I think I whispered to DFM who I was sitting beside 1 and 10. If it's the same, it might have been you, Harry. If it's the same as their assessment, and I don't know the answer to this, but if it's the same as their assessment on utilities repairs, I think the department check 1 and 10. So when a pavement's dug up and Virgin Media come in and put some cabling in.
It's David Honeyford.
Oh, was it? Yeah.
David Honeyford.
Maybe something around that as well in terms of how do they, I don't think she answered the question, how do they quality assure the pothole repairs as well, and there'll be a method for that, but I don't know what it is.
One other small point, maybe,
Yeah.
Chair, if that's okay.
Yeah, sure.
Some of them, when they have a yellow marker around her, apparently you can't claim for damages after that, but a lot of them with yellow markers around them are flooded or pooled in water, and the yellow marker obviously cannot be seen. So
Okay, that's a good point. Yeah,
question around
Yep,
if that's
fine.
okay. Thank you. Sorry.
problems. Andrew.
Well, Chair, I agree with a lot of things, and sort of don't want to add to them, if that makes sense. And I do notice, yes, the press release, although there's no figure mentioned in addition to the 30 million. I suppose really it's just, I'll speak alone in the comment. It was difficult yesterday not to get into very specific areas. I mean, as someone who is this week has been, even prior to this debate, had been inundated with potholes and such like, but I suppose really it's just how do we try, and I think what you're doing is right, in order to try and approach this as a critical friend or a constructive friend. I'm not sure which, but certainly that's what this role of this committee should be, rather than, I suppose, maybe pot shots at potholes. Maybe, I'm not sure, but you know where I'm going.
No, I do, and look, I think it's also important that the committee rise above individual potholes,
Yeah,
because we all have one. I suspect we all have about 1,000 or 10,000 in our constituencies. The job of the committee, and whilst I understand that sometimes we do, end up dealing with individual issues within our constituency that arise, and John, obviously had very particular issues around the salt and so forth. I'm quite happy to give a wee bit of latitude on the committee in terms of that. I think as you just said, Andrew, the role of the committee is an oversight role. It's a scrutiny role, and it's a regional role. It's not about Near Armagh or North Down in particular. So I think that's important as well, that we do keep it at that sort of macro level where we are scrutinising the work of the Minister and the Department in terms of how she deals with any one of these given issues. Anything else on potholes?
Just briefly.
Yep.
Sorry,
Go ahead. No, go ahead, Stephen. I'll take
It's
that.
just very briefly, just to echo all what's been said, but I think it's just the scale and magnitude of it. It's in every corner of the country, whether you're in Fermanagh, South Tyrone, Londonderry, right through to the Greater Belfast area and so on. So I think that needs to be highlighted. It's not just an isolated issue where you talk about localised.
And to be fair to the Minister, I think she more or less agreed with that yesterday. I mean, it's massive, and it's regional. It's across all our council areas.
Obviously the weather, is a factor. That's a fact. There's no doubt about it. But the weather can't be the sole blame factor as well. And we do need to see more from the Minister on this. And I think it's certainly the role of the committee to press for major improvements, which are greatly needed ultimately to resolve this major problem.
Yeah, absolutely. Cal.
Yeah, thanks, Chair. Yeah, Chair, for someone who's been around a while, I mean, this has been a problem. Potholes been a problem for long many day, and obviously it's grown worse. And I mean, I know all the councillors and all them, and there's been contact. Two things I want to raise. Harry raised the point about the yellow, and he's right about it. There's a certain period once it's marked that it has to be done. Do you know what I mean? That's the rules. Once it's marked, there's, I don't know, it's a 4 week. There's a period of time once it's identified that it has to be done, and that's certainly within legislation or regulations. The other thing too, Chair, and I mean, you know, if we're serious with a debate in the chamber yesterday, I mean, if we're serious, and the minister's outlined her approach as best she can, and it's been nothing new in any of the committees, but we need to support the minister in more money to address this problem. If it comes a request from the officials or whoever, we need to look at it, because there is an outstanding issue there in terms of dealing with this here. So, you know, I would like, if that request comes through, that we support the minister in that, because it's every road right across the province, no matter where you go, and we've all the roads, and I know we've had this debate about it has to be a certain depth, 100 mil or whatever it is, or 10 centimetres, whatever depth, and then the drive past to do one and they leave another. Like, I mean, you know, we need to be serious about how we're doing now. For the conversation yesterday, and I'm mindful of the committee's role, but I would like so also. And Chair, I don't know where it's at. I know the minister's identified this exercise, which is identifying the roads. Is there something for us in terms of a research paper where they've done other exercise elsewhere? Because it's not just here. Because, you know, if you travel around any part of the Isles, even over in England, it seems to be identifying thing right across the board. And I don't know, as part of us as a scrutiny committee, is there a paper we can get there to see how these things have been addressed, other than? But my primary thing is, if we're asked for more money, if the minister's asking for more money for support, I'd like to think the committee would support it. You know.
Yep. Okay. No, that's fine, Cal. Thank you for that, Andrew.
Just if we're doing a research paper, certainly whatever. But again, money must come into that research paper, and just how much is being spent, how much is being spent, where the money comes from, and such like. Because again, I think yes, we know that. I mean, the problem is deteriorating. I drive a van, so I mean, I'm not terribly car precious, but even I've noticed the deterioration, and that's probably saying something. But research paper, yep, totally fine. But again, I think there needs to be very precise where, you know, what the department spends on the potholes, what it has spent, what it needs to spend, as you say, temporary versus permanent, even full road relaying as such. I mean, I think we need to really work out what all the options. Sorry for.
No, like that's fine. I think it'll spiral out. Somebody made the point, and I don't remember who it was, about new roads or repairing the roads we have, and it's nice to get new roads, and there's reasons for it. The A5 in particular is going to obviously sub judice, but and being considered. But you know, it's an expensive road, and I did hear someone make that point very recently about, you know, the amount of money that we're spending on any given new road versus fixing the roads that we have. And we have to understand that a lot of what we're discussing here is, whilst it's politics, maybe with a small p on this committee, there's opportunity cost to it. You know, politics is the exercise of resource allocation, essentially. So when you do one thing, you then can't do something else with the same resource. So we'll get into that kind of territory. I'll pause it there.
Chair, just on that point.
Go ahead.
Because I heard members in the chamber yesterday, and this thing, we can shift money out of here and do this and do that. That's not the way it works. So, I mean, it shouldn't be for the committee members on this committee to understand capital, resource and spend and everything else. You just can't lift money off here and say, we'll do this here. That's not the example made. So if you're doing a proper, for less, we as a committee can get this piece of paper to say what's what, but it should be passed on to all members of the committee or members of the chamber yesterday who's asking. We'll take it off here and move it. That's not that simple. It doesn't happen. But if we identify exactly where capital and where resources spent and why it's spent and how it's spent, then it's a good guide for the whole element. Because I heard some questions just in the chamber, and it just was, they're entitled to ask questions, but it wasn't. You just, no matter what committee you go in, you just can't say, I'll take capital and move it over here. It doesn't work that way, Chair.
Yeah.
So.
Okay, no, that's fine. I think everyone's had a go at that. Michael.
Just to check what members have agreed to. Well, haven't agreed to it yet. Well, or may
agree to.
Agreeing to write to the department so to get available data on the prevalence of potholes by council area, longevity of temporary repairs, associated costs of repair, the budgets that are allocated to roads maintenance. Has there been a recent change in method in repairing roads, the system for equality assurance, and around yellow markers to raise that some can't be seen when they're underwater, and the timescales for repair, presumably once the yellow marker appears.
Yeah.
I think that was all for that. And the other thing that members may or may not agree is to ask research, if there's existing research, comparative research on potholes, and if not, to commission them to do that.
That's fine. Just for clarity, Michael, the budget by council area. That was the only one I picked up on. Members agreed on that? Yep. Okay, great. That takes us to item 4, this draft minutes. Page 7, you will see the draft minutes for the meeting on the 28th of January. I just need to seek committee agreement that they're happy enough with those minutes and they're fair and accurate, and if they are, and committee agrees, I will sign them. Are committee agreed? Super. Correspondence. At page 17, we have the core memo. I will take you through things that I have picked up on. If anyone has anything else, then please raise it at the end. We will deal with it and we will note the rest. So we're at page 17. At page which is the memo. At page 23, we have the correspondence from the Committee of Finance regarding December monitoring and allocation of funding. At our meeting on the 21st of January, we did note a response from the Minister for Infrastructure in respect to its previous request regarding how high priority bids received an allocation over what had been classified inescapable by the Department as set out in its submission for the December monitoring round. I think that was a query that I had. At its meeting of the 20th of January, committee considered further correspondence from the Minister in which he sets out the outcome of the allocations agreed by the Executive. I think the Minister's line on that was it was an Executive decision. I'm still not particularly convinced, but I'm going to leave it there. The committee agreed to write to the Department to seek further clarity on DFI's financial position in respect of the pay pressure that was not fully funded during December monitoring and the list of capital projects that will be completed in the financial year. I think it's a pretty fair reflection of what we've considered in this so far. So unless anyone's got anything additional to raise around this item, I would be seeking committee agreement to forward the correspondence on December monitoring issued from the Minister to the Committee for Finance for their information. Has anyone got anything else on monitoring? Or are committee happy enough with my suggestion?
Happy enough.
Okay. Page 39, we have correspondence from Climate NI providing a response to the committee requesting oral evidence on the committee stage of the SUDS bill. I just need, first of all, committee agreement to note and include it in the bill folder. And then secondly, to note, to note and include it in the bill folder. Our committee agreed.
Right, yep.
Okay, fine. The only thing that I have in terms of raising is a pivotal report, and then I will open up to members in terms of anything else that they wish to raise off core. And it's more or less to highlight this in case members didn't get to the pivotal report. Pivotal do some fairly interesting stuff, I have to say. In the pivotal report under this committee's remit, which is Department of Infrastructure, they highlighted a couple of things, and you'll see it. I can't quite see what page is it on. Do we know what page it's on? Whenever I print these things out, unfortunately, it only ever prints out half of the number. I'm going to get. You're laughing at me, Andrew. Has nobody else ever printed anything out? And it's
143, Chair.
What is it?
143.
143. So I'm going to guess it's 160 then. It looks a little bit like 160 on my printout here. So look, I'll flag up. You can fly to it. It's page 35, 34, 35 of the actual pivotal report itself, and the bottom of that page it says it is therefore essentially pivotal is saying previous reports highlighted the cost of inaction and potential solutions to improve wastewater infrastructure, and then it goes on to say it is therefore concerning that the infrastructure and communities ministers met just once in the last year. I'm not entirely sure what the linkage is there. I'm going to guess it's housing and communities sort of saying infrastructure, please sort out this wastewater because we can't build enough social houses because we can't find capacity for them. However, that's one that I just want to flag up to the committee. And the other one is on page 35, which says about the progress made, to be fair, in planning applications that the department have done quite recently. Right at the end, it then states, however, challenges remain as local applications are at 19.8 weeks above the 15-week target and an increase from last year's figures. And we will consider that, obviously, in when we get to planning later on today in the raised paper, but I just want to flag that up to members more for noting unless anyone has any comments on it. Andrew?
Well, just to agree with you, and while I was somewhat giggling, I was struggling to get the page turned around the right way, so I shouldn't really be giggling at you, Chair, no harm. So mea culpa. No, just to agree totally with you.
Swing around there, kiddo, swing around.
just agree. I mean, I would actually go to page, I think it's actually page 5 in the executive summary that actually notes wastewater as the first issue of the executive. I mean, it's at the very start as the, now whether or not there's anything empirical about that or just happened to be, but I mean, I maybe read into that somewhat. But yeah, I just agree with, and also the planning, but also the fact that maybe potholes even weren't mentioned in it either.
I did note that. I didn't want to, lead the committee into another pothole discussion, but potholes were not mentioned in the pivotal report. I get that. I think it's obviously an issue that's very thematic at this point in time, but the wastewater stuff, is just really mission critical. So I'm sure we will be returning to that and be further discussions around that as we move through the bill. Michael?
Wasn't pivotal.
Justin?
Just to further highlight wastewater issue, as I've said multiple times, no drains, no cranes. Last year in the south of Ireland there were 36,000 houses built. In the north, 1,379. That's a damning indictment of this executive and of the infrastructure minister and of the communities minister. What's going on with 50,000 people on the waiting list? What is going on? And they're meeting once to discuss the problem.
I think it is problematic, and I'm not having to ping at either minister in particular. I think the linkage for me, obviously, and you've rightly pointed it out, Justin, is obviously the communities minister does want to build and has targets for social housing. You take that, you roll that. I mean, you sort of give an example there. You roll it back one stage, and it is dependent. And we know this on this committee, it is dependent on the provision of proper connections and sewage and wastewater and so forth. And so that problem needs solved in order to do the latter. But no, thank you for that.
Chair, just to remind members that last week when members considered correspondence from the Communities Committee, and they asked and members agreed for what we're doing around wastewater to be forwarded to that committee, just on that subject.
Okay. My proposal then is to note the rest of the core, unless there's anything off the core memo that people would like to raise. I want to make sure people get a chance. That's okay. So we agreed to note the rest of the items. Someone needs to say yes. Yeah, okay, there we go. All right, good. That's item 6. Item 7 is the GDL. And the officials will come in. Just a silver star to Andrew for getting some Latin in early into the committee. We're getting around our languages fairly, so that's always good.
French last week.
What's that?
French last week.
I did think, to be fair, we've had some Greek as well, so it's good. good to see the ancient languages aren't dead.
I must admit.
Daddy.
It's fine. Okay. Okay, so our witnesses are getting settled. Adrian, Chris, Pat, you're very welcome to the committee to talk about GDL, which is something that we considered last week and obviously was announced by the Minister on Good Morning Ulster also last week. So for members' benefits at table 3, we have the clerk's memo. We have some questions, assembly questions in GDL at 6. I need committee agreement that this session is recorded on Hansard.
Agreed.
Yeah, brilliant. And in that case, I will invite the departmental officials to make an opening statement, which is up to 10 minutes. And then you can expect about 120 questions after that. That's a joke, gentlemen, you can't smile. Just on that, there probably will be quite a few questions for obvious reasons. I would encourage you, I think the session will be lengthy as it is, but I would encourage you to try and keep your answers not brief, but terse, if you can. But Chris, we're in your hands.
Okay, thank you, Chair, and I shall also reciprocate by keeping my remarks as brief as I possibly can. So, first of all, I'd like to thank you, Chair, and members for the opportunity to come in front of the committee. The Minister has asked me to say, due to her diary commitments, she is unable to attend, but she was eager that officials came here today to answer your questions and update you on GDL. The Minister has also said she is keen to discuss further with this issue with you when she attends the committee in a few weeks. And I would say at the start, I think we would recognise that we could have informed members better about this whenever we did, and we have taken that lesson on board. So, as I said, thank you for the opportunity. So, Pat is the Senior Responsible Officer for the operational delivery of graduated driver licensing, or GDL, and he has been involved from the outset. There's very few who are left around. I believe Cathal, yourself, was here, I'll say. So as this was a 2016
He's been here since 1973, so...
Still working on it, man. Still working on it. And other things along it. But
So Pat has corporate memory on this as well, which is particularly valuable to us. And Adrian is here. He will be dealing with the process of the subordinate legislation. I am over the policy for the wider road safety issues, so I would deal with all the range of stuff that is set out in the Road Safety Action Plan in general. So first of all, I would also, and again, not first of all, but I would also say, I mean, at this point, note the deaths that have happened this week, Chair. I mean, this is an issue to prevent people dying on the roads. This graduated driver license is simply to have fewer dead people, is why we do this. This is to try and reduce road deaths, and everybody in this room will be quite conscious of the 2 deaths that have taken place this week. This year so far, there have been 7 deaths. That is more than this time last year, but this is about what we're doing here. We're trying to stop dead people turning up on our roads. This is a life-saving change. It will result in fewer deaths on the road, and it's one of a range of actions that are set out. You'll be aware the policy of graduated driver licensing was set out in the 2016 Act. This is the process we're going through now is the implementation of it, and the 2016 Act is one aspect of graduated driver licensing. It can be viewed as a spectrum, and obviously I've paid close attention, Chair and members, to the questions that you've been putting into the department, and there are a lot of ideas for what graduated driver licensing could look like. The graduated driver licensing that is here is the one that's been expressed in the 2016 Act. A lot of the detail there. That doesn't mean that that is the definition of graduated driver licence. There are other options, and a lot of the ideas that members have would be what could be added into a future iteration of graduated driver licence. Chair, I promise to be short. That's as much as I'm going to say, and just hand yourself over to yourselves for your questions.
Chris, short indeed. Thank you very much. And that's the sort of witnesses we like. I'm going to start off just with a quote. I'll maybe just, you said that you could have informed, or the Minister or officials could have informed members better in terms of the policy, okay? Just for a bit of clarity, we weren't informed at all. It's not about informing us any better. It's not a scale. We found out about it in Good Morning Ulster, okay? So it's worth noting that, and leading on from that, committee, and I've said it this morning and I said it last week, committee has signalled its intent to clearly support any policies or actions that the Minister brings forward that cuts down on drivers' deaths in Northern Ireland. Absolutely, and who wouldn't? So most of our issues this morning are not about the policy intent, it's about the process of how this is brought in, which will lead me into my first question, which is just from where you left off, which was the fact that you've been monitoring the AQs that have been coming in. I know that I've submitted quite a few, I'm sure other members probably have too. And you used the phrase that, the ideas that were being generated through those AQs, could be fed into this policy, okay? So my first question is, why was this not brought to this committee so you could have our ideas and then the Minister could go away and formulate a policy? Why, if you said this morning that the stuff that we're feeding to you is useful, why did the Minister announce it without letting anybody know on the BBC, without first coming to the committee and saying, what ideas do you have? And perhaps even doing an updated consultation, because the one you're relying on is at least 8 years old. Why was it done that way?
So thank you for the opportunity to clarify. So specifically what I said was that those would be for a potential future iteration of a policy. This is the one that is set in the 2016 Act. The detail is on the face of it. So the issues that members are suggesting cannot be implemented by retrospectively putting them into the 2016 Act. So the notion of a graduated driver licences has many forms. Some are wider and some are narrower. The Assembly took a view in 2016 and put in legislation exactly what form of graduated driver licensing they look like, and that is what the Minister has moved to implement. So, just to be really clear, what I was saying was that the Assembly may in future take a view that a wider iteration of our option of graduated driver licensing might be. That would be whenever the ideas would be fed in. This is already decided. This is already stated the will of the Assembly. This is written into the face of the bill. So the way that the graduated driver licensing is being implemented was extensively debated and set out in the Act. So that's why it is being implemented. And I was acknowledging that the members have brought ideas, but also, just to be clear, those can't be fed back into the 2016 Act. That is already an Act of the Assembly. So
that's useful. In terms of is it the case that the department just looked at the bill that was standing there? Now, again, I'd make the point that it was, as you said, it's 2016, so it's 10 years ago that this was actually enacted. It was enacted by a colleague of Justin's and brought through the Assembly. What engagement prior to the Minister's announcement were there with stakeholders about what they'd like to see, or is this all relying on stuff from 2016? And the world was quite different in 2016, and we faced different problems. Technology was obviously very different as well. What engagement, and specifically in your reply, for example, the ones most affected by this, there's two groups: people who are obviously going to have to go through this, and obviously the driving instructors. What level of engagement did you have with either of those groups?
We had extensive engagement with those groups and other groups as well, including sporting organisations, as part of the consultation period. We met with the driving instructors. The former Minister of the Environment, Alex Atwood, actually met with the DINAC, which was the umbrella organisation for driving instructors. He met with them in January 2012, from memory, maybe June 2012.
And I don't often stop witnesses, but I will, and I see where you're going with your answer. I mean, prior to last Wednesday, let's say in the last 6 months, because the Minister's obviously been running Fresh and Post, and previously it was Minister O'Dowd. In the lead up to this announcement last Wednesday, what engagement did you have with either driving instructors to find their view on this, or young people or anyone who's going to be affected by it?
We meet regularly with the umbrella organisation for driving instructors, now known as NIAC, and that's an agenda item on the agenda for those meetings. We meet with those twice a year, and we update them on it. We had no engagement with young people because the primary legislation was in place, and the issue was that we were implementing what the primary legislation had in the bill. There's no opportunity to change what was in the bill, so we were simply implementing it. The delay was caused by factors which were outside of our control, because we had originally intended to implement the bill on the 1st of October 2018, but because of other factors, that wasn't possible, and this is the earliest opportunity for us to implement the bill.
Okay. Just staying with NIAC, you mentioned that it's a standing item. You meet with them a couple of times a year. So if we ask for the minutes of that meeting, would we see graduated driver's licenses on one of those agenda items? Were they informed in that process?
You may not see it on the agenda item, but it would be something that my colleagues would be speaking to them about whenever they meet with them. I would have to go back and dig out the agenda and the minutes of those meetings.
At what level of confidence would you have that if you went back to those minutes, obviously you sort of said there that there was engagement and you meet with them regularly. Would we see GDL on one of those minutes? Would it be?
I have 100% confidence that on the 25th of January 2025 that the item was on the agenda for NIAC to meet Minister O'Dowd, and NIAC cancelled and postponed the meeting because of internal issues within the organisation.
Okay. So prior to that, so what we've heard from driver's license is that they weren't aware. Do you think is that fair? The NIAC sort of said they weren't aware this was coming in and they were surprised. Would that be your understanding?
NIAC are aware that GDL is coming in.
But prior to the minister going on GMU,
but they wouldn't have been aware of the 1st of October date for the implementation. In fact, that wasn't something that we had made publicly available until the minister had announced it.
Right, that's fine. So again, most of the information that we have gleaned has been from the department. Have an FAQ up now, which is certainly useful. And on that FAQ, it says evidence suggests that GDL can reduce collision risk, which may lead to lower premiums for new young drivers over time. What level? And again, I'm talking about current. I'm not talking about 2012 or 2016. What engagement have you had with insurance companies regarding that statement? And do you have an evidence base that insurance would come down?
We did meet with the insurance industry in the run-up to the bill becoming an act in 2016.
Again, insurance has changed quite a bit in 10 years.
Just want to set the context.
Yeah, okay.
And that appears in the Committee of the Environment's report dated 19th of March 2016. And we have a request from the Association of British Insurers to meet them, and we're meeting them next week to provide them with an update on GDL.
And further to that, Chair, the Association of British Insurers have constant contact with the department and have met the minister. And the insurers are incredibly across all the road safety issues to do with Northern Ireland. They can come in and quote you exactly what the number of deaths are. When they meet you, they know exactly how many people have died on our roads this year, and they know exactly what it is that we're doing on the broader road safety issues. So we have talked to them about graduated driver licensing, and they have said, so you're not going to be able to put a figure on what is the likely change in insurance premiums because of graduated driver license. That's a commercially sensitive issue which each insurer will do through their own loss adjusters or risk assessors or however that particularly works. They won't share that with us, but what they can say is if you reduce the number of people dying on our roads, premiums will go down, and you reduce the number of collisions, which is what causes the number of people dying to reduce, that will lead through in time to reduce premiums. And you'll be aware perhaps that in Wales, where the number of collisions have reduced by 20% due to the introduction of 20 mile an hour in urban areas, premiums have dropped by on average £45 a year. Now that's a figure which is a direct result of the number of deaths and collisions reducing. So it will become evident after the event, but we can thoroughly expect that it would occur.
Fine. I'll give you one more, and then I'm going to go to colleagues. Again, it's just off the FAQs. A program of training that details the learning required to become a safe driver. This must be completed and recorded in a logbook before a learner driver can undertake their practical test. The program of training and completion of the logbook is being developed as a mobile app and will also be available as a browser option. Can you just explain a little bit more about what I've just read out there?
Yes. During the consultation process back in 2012, 2014, 2015, the vast majority of young people who were consulted preferred to have a digital platform as opposed to a large, thick book to do their programme of training from. So we accepted that as part of the consultation that we carried out at that time, which was published in completed in January 2018. That is now being developed with our IT strategic partner. That will be on an app with a logbook, and it will be available on a browser. So each of the 14 modules and the one optional module will be on the browser, and the same for motorcyclists. The training doesn't have to be done sequentially. It can be done in any order, and it will be depending on how that driver is progressing with their driving instructor or supervising driver. Though the app provides us with the opportunity to include animation and video clips to help the learner and help the learner understand what it is that they're hoping to learn as part of the process of learning to drive safely before they take their test.
And the programme of training and completion of the logbook, is that assessed in some way?
It's assessed by the driving instructor,
Right.
And it's developed in line with the Goals for Driver Education, which is an internationally recognised matrix for learning to drive. So the bottom left-hand corner of that matrix is essentially the technical competence of having to get a vehicle from A to B. The top right-hand corner is looking at human factors, such as your feelings, your behaviours, your attitude towards driving, what's affecting you on the day, how do you recognise those factors, how those factors might in fact influence your driving, and how that could potentially result in a collision which could result in a death or serious injury.
You, Pat. I have a battery of other questions, but I'm not going to dominate the committee here. I'm going to go to Stephen, who's next.
Thank you, Chair. Thank you, gentlemen. It's good to see you again. I know you've been in previously on a number of issues over the years. So, first of all, I would say that we do welcome any initiative to ultimately improve road safety, and you've highlighted some of the stark reasoning around that. A couple of questions. In the not too distant past, I think it's fair to say that we have seen significant delays in both driver and vehicle testing. When obviously given the scale of these changes, how confident are you that you and your department will have the resources to ultimately manage this GDL process, which is quite extensive and significant change to what we're used to?
Totally confident.
Well, say in the not too distant past, there was those major issues around even getting a driver test.
Driver testing currently is sitting at 31.64 days as a waiting time. That varies across each of the centres that we have. Some centres it's much less than that.
Yeah, but you can appreciate even just in the duration of this committee, the lifespan of this committee within the last 2 years, you were in front of this committee and we were discussing such issues around delays.
We set out our plan how we were going to address that, and we have addressed it. And if you look at the statistics over the last year, you'll find that we're conducting more driving tests than we've conducted in the past, and in some months we're hitting record levels of driver testing because of the resources that we have in place to do that.
I welcome that, and constituents have raised that with me for certainly 2 years ago. It was a major issue, so it's not 2016 or 2012 we're talking about. It was relative. These are real issues, and that would be a concern that I have. But I appreciate your confidence, and that's...
You're comparing apples and pears.
No, we're
what
not.
We were doing was we were coming out of the pandemic when we had serious difficulties with waiting times, and that's not only us, that was right across the whole of Europe. And I can say that with authority because I'm also the president of the International Commission for Driver Testing, so I know what other competent authorities were experiencing right across the European Union. And we put in place measures that of overtime, increased resources, working on Saturdays and Sundays and bank holidays when testing wasn't normally available, to gradually bring down the waiting times for driver testing, and we're continuing to do that. In fact, we're in the process now of going out for another driving examiner competition to recruit more driving examiners.
Okay, and he is confident around getting this in place within 8 months for October start date?
We're confident that we will have the app and the website and all of the materials in place for the 1st of October. There is an issue in relation to the subordinate legislation that has to go through, and if that goes through, then yes, we will.
Okay. Another issue around resources obviously is police resources, and I would imagine you have engaged extensively with them in this process historically, and I would like to think more recently as well. What level of engagement have you had with them in terms of resourcing these changes if they are rolled out?
It's a matter for the police to determine what their resourcing level is, but we did meet with as a regular a meeting with the PSNI Roads Division. We met with them last Tuesday morning, and we explained to them that the GDL was being introduced and the impact of that. So I actually spoke to senior officers within roads policing, and they warmly welcomed it. In fact, Chief Superintendent Sam Donaldson was on Good Evening Extra that evening, warmly welcoming the introduction of GDL.
Okay, turning then to the detail around the actual GDL itself, the 14 modules has been flagged up by constituents and people, residents right across Northern Ireland, I suppose, around the cost of it. You know, there was challenges around cost as it is to get the driving licence, and that has been something that has been raised with me. So I suppose, what assurance would you give people that the cost will remain as affordable as possible, given the increase in time, you know, an increase in modules for some drivers that wouldn't take the 6 months ordinarily, you know, to pass a test as it is today? And also then just to touch upon why the 6 months learning period. Obviously, I presume you've looked at best practice around the world, so I'm keen just to establish why the 6 month figure was arrived at.
Okay, there's a lot in there, so I'll just try and unpack that one at a time.
Yeah.
The proposed cost for the programme of training is £17 for the 14 mandatory modules and the one optional module. Roughly works out at approximately £1.21 per module, or the price of a litre of milk. So that'll be written in the statute, and that'll have to be changed in statute at some point when we do a fees review. In terms of best practice, if you go back to the Committee of the Environment's report on the 19th of March 2016, you'll find that it was the committee who decided to set the 6 month mandatory minimum learning period. Officials had proposed a 12-month mandatory minimum learning period, which is the standard in other jurisdictions where GDL has been introduced. But you'll find from the report that the committee were concerned that a 12-month mandatory minimum learning period would have put an unnecessary burden on and disadvantaged the rural community. So they moved that to a 6 month mandatory minimum period, and that was introduced in law.
Okay, the other just final point around the restrictions from 11 p.m. to 6 a.m. That has caused some concern as well with people, particularly, you know, younger people maybe working in the hospitality sector, for example, around late night shifts and maybe bringing colleagues home and so on. Is there any, you know, the evidence base around that? Obviously, that is, I presume, it's the, you know, the time when young drivers are at most at risk, you know, and the most accidents and so on. Is there any more detail around that, just how those times were arrived at?
Well, yes, because the Assembly decided that it was from 11 p.m. to 6 a.m. Officials had proposed 10 p.m. to 6 a.m. Because that would be best practice elsewhere, and we arrived at 11 until 6 a.m. There is extensive research on nighttime passenger restrictions, principally produced by the Transport Research Laboratory in London, www.trl.co.uk. And if you put in graduated driver licensing into their search engine, they produce a list of the reports that they have done on graduated driver licensing. And in all of the jurisdictions that they have looked at, nighttime restrictions is a key component of the GDL, and their reports also indicate that there is little or no impact on rural communities when this is implemented because of the mitigating measures that are put in place to manage that.
Okay, just final point, Chair, if I may. The removal of the 45 mile an hour, as I think, has been generally welcomed, that restriction, particularly around motorways and so on, where it can be dangerous sometimes if a car is driving at 40-45 miles per hour. Just around the issue then, if they are plates for 2 years, will that have a knock-on impact on insurance costs? We all know around this table, you know, the cost of insurance. One constituent quoted £4,000 for a young driver for a modest car for 1 year, which is quite frankly prices a lot of people out of being able to afford a vehicle. Will the changes have any impact, negative or positive, do you feel, on insurance costs?
matter for the insurance industry. I
I
wouldn't
know,
be
but
in a position
you're the
to
folks
answer
that
it.
are you're the folks that are driving forward these significant changes, which are going to impact all of our constituents' lives. So I think you do need a bit more detail around that.
Well, I think the changes are going to impact their lives because it's going to save their lives. That's the aim of this. So what we have is the first 6 months of the post-test restriction. And that first 6 months is to identify for the police and others that this driver is subject to nighttime restrictions. The next 18 months is so that learner, that new novice driver, gains experience in driving in lower risk environments over time, because it's experience. Now, if you look at the statistics in relation to collisions and killed and seriously injured, those that are from 13 months to 18 months, I think it's 89% it was quoted last week in terms of the increase in collisions against the baseline. And that's just after they've come out of their R plates. So we're removing the 45 miles per hour speed limit, and the reason for that is that we would like to test people and train people up to posted speeds. The reason why the 15th module is optional, which is the motorway driving module, is because not everybody in Northern Ireland has easy access to a motorway, so we didn't make that component mandatory.
Okay, thanks, gentlemen. Thanks, Chair.
Thank you, Stephen. Harry.
Thank you very much, Chair. Gentlemen. Your licensing department, will you require more staff to implement this, or will you be able to use what you have or move people around a bit?
We'll be using the staff that we have to manage GDL.
So does that mean you need to move them around, or will you have enough in your department?
Well, we have enough within the agency to resource graduated driver licensing.
Yeah, very good. Good. And in terms of costs, what's it forecast to cost the department, say yearly?
Well, there's the initial setup cost, which is £2 million, and that's part of that is in this current financial year, and the remainder will be in the next financial year. So that's the capital, and that's to create the app and the website and the technical arrangements that will support it. And then we'll have the running costs, the £17 for the programme of training. That will be used to resource the running costs of the system and resource the team to manage GDL.
And will that £17 cover pretty much all then, once it's up and running? Set up?
Because we're working on the assumption that we will have approximately 35,000 Category B provisional driving licence each year. And so if everyone who gets a provisional driving licence has to get the programme of training, then a simple multiplication, and that's where we get the resource from.
Thank you, gentlemen. Thank you, Chair.
Okay, thanks, Harry. Peter.
Thank you, Chair. Thank you guys for coming in today. I appreciate it. I'm obviously wasn't elected at all in 2016, so I'm keen to hear a bit about that process. Pat, you'd mentioned that these were introduced in 2016 via the Act. I think there was an aspiration on the 1st of October 2018 to have made progress on this, and that didn't happen. Can you talk us through from 2016 up until the announcement as to what did it look like in terms of trying to enact? Because a lot of the questions I was getting from constituents was, it's taken 10 years to get this far. What happened within that decade period? Like, were there groups, were there meetings taking place? Can you talk us through that?
I need to be delicate as I answer this question.
For everybody as well, just if you wanted to take it.
We were ready to launch GDL, and the programme team, the project plan was ready for launch on the 1st of October 2018. And we were making good progress until the Assembly collapsed in January of 2017 and didn't restore again until January 2020. The pandemic then arrived in March of 2020, and then in the early part of 2021, 2022, whenever we started to emerge from that, as was just mentioned to Mr. Dunn, we were facing significant challenges within the agency in relation to vehicle testing and driver testing. So all of our resource was focused on trying to recover from the pandemic, and it's really only been in the last year that we've been able to refocus our minds again on GDL. and start the process then of basically taking it from its out of abeyance and back into active management to implement the GDL.
It sounds like almost clunkily. You've been kind of treading water in some respect on these proposals since 2016. External variables have kicked in terms of
external variables,
COVID as well.
But the bill was law and had royal assent, so there's nothing could be done about that. It was always going to be about implementation, and if the factors that I've just described hadn't have happened, then we'd have been through the SL1s, we'd have been through the SRs. The normal procedure would have all been done and dusted by October 2018, and GDL would have been in place by then. But that was unfortunate, that didn't happen.
I, for my sins, also sit on the policing board as well, so would engage with the police as all-party group chair for road safety, would engage with Sam Donaldson quite a lot as well. Police, in terms of engagement with them in advance of the announcement, I know a lot of MLAs were annoyed with the suddenness of it. Had police been in constant consultation with, in terms of letting them know that it was coming, or was it just that phone call that day with the police?
It was, well, the police were aware that we were working on GDL because we have regular meetings with roads policing, but they weren't aware that it was being introduced on the 1st of October until the meeting last Tuesday, when I provided them with a briefing at that meeting.
So on that as well, the department chairs a road safety forum which has all the blue lights on it, as well as other departments with a contribution to road safety. So as a member of that board, the police were aware of that. The intention was from the Minister to introduce graduated driver licensing as soon as possible. So they were well aware that that was something that was in the public domain, that it was to be that. So yeah, it wouldn't have come as a surprise.
And then just lastly, in terms of that subordinate legislation piece, what does that tangibly look like for the public? That's one of the queries that I've been getting. 1st of October, this is going to be coming in. It's taken us long to get here. There's no external variables at the minute. Can you just talk us through like that subordinate legislation piece?
With pleasure, I'll pass it over to my colleagues.
Okay.
Suppose GDL is possibly a wee bit unusual because, as Chris has said, the majority of the measures are actually in the Act. So the subordinate legislation that needs to come in now sort of supports the Act, brings in sort of the bits around the edges that need to be there, so they're not huge in themselves in terms of pieces of legislation. It's all about the Act in this case. It's not always the case. A lot of times Acts have frameworks which requires a lot of subordinate. This is not the case in this point. So in terms of processing the subordinate legislation, it's currently with the Minister for clearance. So once it's cleared, it will come to this. SL1s will come to the committee with the drafts. So there's going to be a commencement order, which is there's no procedure on the commencement order, no assembly procedure in the commencement order. But it's a key element, because that's the one that will commence all of these provisions that are already in the Act. There'll be a driving licence amendment regulation, which is a negative procedure, a motorways SR, which is also negative, and then a thing that you'll maybe be most interested in the shorter term. There's a special restrictions SR, which is the one that will introduce the new plates, and that's draft affirmative. So once the committee has finished their scrutiny around the subordinate, which says should be with you shortly, we will move to lay the draft affirmative, a draft of the draft affirmative SR in the Assembly, which will then require a debate in the Assembly. So there'll be an opportunity, if you like, in the Assembly for GDL to be debated in terms of that SR, because that's the purpose of bringing it in, is to facilitate GDL. Once the Assembly then has debated and hopefully affirmed that SR, which obviously the committee will have considered before that debate, the examiner statutory rules will have looked at it and give you a report on it as well. So once it's affirmed in the Assembly, we will then move to make the other pieces of legislation and put those in place. And the hope is that the legislation will be in place before summer recess, depending obviously on the committee's scrutiny. But so it'll be in place hopefully before summer recess, and therefore there'll be at that point the certainty around the 1st of October date for implementation.
I'm actually quite reassured by that. I think we've got about 8 months for the 1st of October, so I look forward to this coming back before the committee. Thank you. Cheers.
Thank you, Peter. I've got just one before I go on to Andrew. I think at one point, I'm not sure whether it's Pat or Chris, said that there was, I'll quote you back, an issue with the subordinate legislation. Is there any? They're both shaking their heads at me. That's what I wrote down. So, do you expect?
Chair, I think perhaps it was the issue being that it has to be
It needs it.
It has to be scrutinised by the committee before there's any certainty about that October date. So that may be the point.
Okay, that's fine. Okay, Andrew.
Chair, you got me once with Downpatrick and County Down Railway Museum, and you got my question there again, so you did.
You're joking, I'm so sorry. Well, it's worrying for both of us if we're thinking similarly, Andrew. It'll do neither of us any good in the long run. Go ahead, sorry, apologies.
I genuinely made the same note there about, there was a quote there just about an issue around subordinate legislation, but that seems to be...
It's all about timing.
Timing, perfect. Like comedy. I do want to say just at the start, thoughts very you referenced it as well, Dr. Hughes, about the tragedy. One of those tragedies was in my own constituency, and I mean it's actually very difficult to process what happened as a father of a son. I suppose really, I asked the minister in the chamber, but I just want to go back to sort of what is the empirical evidence regarding graduated driver licensing and how this really will affect fewer deaths. Chair.
No, the empirical evidence is quite extensive, and my memory's good, but I just need to read this to provide. I've mentioned already the Transport Research Laboratory, who do a great deal of work in this, and Dr. Sean Hellman and Dr. Neil Kinnear were working on the project with us, but they rely on Mayhew, Williams and Robinson from 2016, IIHS 2012, Vahoye and Lundquist 2015, Mayhew et al. 2016, and Deserick and Williams 2015. All of those are extensive research papers that are done in GDL and how GDL has operated in other jurisdictions, and what the benefits have been from introducing GDL, and how GDL has improved the statistics in terms of people who have been killed and seriously injured on the roads in those jurisdictions, particularly young novice drivers.
I'm going to come back to that again. The other one that was reading through some of the things, and there is, and it's been mentioned before about the logbooks. I'm just curious as to how that is going to work. I mean, I think logbooks are a good way to demonstrate learning, especially in a practical matter such as driving. But again, just curious as to how that actually will be used. Will it be a tiebreaker of sorts? Will it be just a reference for the instructor? Is it purely a learning tool for the driver? I'm just curious as to how what the function role of the log. I think it's a good idea, but I'm just curious as to what the actual practicality.
The logbook is in legislation, so the logbook has to be completed. The programme of training is completed, and the logbook has to be completed before a practical driving test can be undertaken. So, because we have a digital solution to this, whenever a driver who becomes entitled to drive a Category B power, which is generally at the age of 17, and they purchase the programme for training and access to the logbook, we can verify that we already know their identity because we have given them their provisional driving licence, so they're verified onto the system. Their approved driving instructor is already verified by us as well. both through the ordinary driving licence that he or she holds, but also through the approved driving instructor's licence that he or she holds, because we regulate that industry. So we know who he or she is and we know who they are. We also know who the supervising driver is, because that could be a parent or guardian. And when they log on to that user's account, then we have a record of who they are. So whenever the programme of training is being conducted, and remember, the programme of training in itself is a structured approach to what driving instructors normally do, but what we're adding into that are those aspects of learning to drive that we can't normally test, but that they will now have to train. And that's largely down to behaviours and attitudes and feelings, etc., as well as the technical components of learning how to drive to make you technically competent, how to drive in different conditions, nighttime, poor weather, rain, etc., etc. And also, instead of learning routes, learning how to drive and using roads which incorporate those factors that are known as causation factors in road traffic collisions. The programme of training will then, each module will then be completed, and there's a red, amber, green component to it, where the ADI will assess whether or not that person needs more learning, is progressing along the learning, or has completed the learning. They will then sign off the logbook. That will come back into our system. Whenever the logbook, all 14 components of the logbook are completed, the programme of training will be recognised as completed for that individual. That will then go to our booking system, and that will put a flag on that person's driving licence. So whenever they apply to do their driving test, we will be able to reference back digitally that the programme of training has been completed and the logbook has been verified. And then the learner will be able to book their driving test in the normal way and then do the driving test.
Not so much questions, so the learner driver fills the logbook out under the supervision of parent, guardian, AN, other assessor or driving instructor says...
No, the learner driver completes the programme of training. The programme of training is conducted with the ADI, because generally speaking, they are the person who has the skills and knowledge to do this properly. Supervising driver can do it as well. We haven't limited it to just a driving instructor, but you go through that structured approach, and then it's verified, and then you can do the test.
And presumably because it's in legislation, that's quite a bona fide. You mentioned yourself there about being the international chair of driver testing. You also mentioned 20 mile per hour speed limits in Wales being reduced or reducing, or maybe just it's all up there sort of. The Royal Way as such. What's been a bigger impact? Is it the 20 mile an hour or the GDL in reducing if you can compare it to places that maybe have the both or one or the other, which is the bigger? Because we're always told as well that speed is the issue really. So I'm just curious on that sort of front.
You start. So 95% of collisions are due to road user behaviour. So that is addressed via the graduated driver licensing will skill up drivers better to be able to take their vehicle onto the road safely. The issue with speed is that the amount of kinetic energy that's involved in a collision, and the human body can only withstand so many forces. So the higher speed a collision takes at, the more likely it is that there will be serious injury or fatality. So both. Graduated driver licensing has been around for decades, and since the 1980s. Reducing speeding so Wales don't have the equivalent of a graduated driver licensing, so they only have the reduction in the speed limits in urban areas. That was brought in 2 years ago, and it's in that, and it's already reduced collisions by about 22%. So it's kind of a standalone thing, but they all contribute. So so it's not that we'd be able to say. So we know that reducing the impact it's had in Wales has been over 20% reduction in collisions and an 18% reduction in fatalities, or perhaps the other way around, but about 20% of reduction in both. So isolated, that's what the speed has done. graduated driver licence of the evidence that Pat has suggested. Does that cover it off? Okay.
If I then just come in, I mean, graduated driver licence has been about since 1966 in New South Wales. They were the first to introduce it, and it's now right across Europe, North America, and Australia, New Zealand, and elsewhere. But if I can just take one of the other main causation factors for collisions, and that's driver distraction. Module 13 of the programme of training is focused entirely on driver distraction and in-car technology. So it takes the learner through what are the things that they must stay focused on, what they must avoid, how to be smart with devices, managing distractions with passengers in the vehicle, the use of collision avoidance systems, collision mitigation systems and how they can be activated, driver information systems, the use of sat-nav systems, how to safely use those, and a number of other factors. It'll just take me too long to go through that complete module and the questions that are associated with it. So you combine those, and that is a structured learning, so that the new learner understands what's involved in driver distraction, but more importantly, what is the impact of driver distraction. And the assessment at the end by the ADI or the supervising examiner in the form of a quiz, which is questions, they then inform the examiner or the instructor whether or not that person has achieved the level that they need to for that particular module. Now, we did this back in 2014. One of my colleagues I sent across to Europe on a European project, and she was on one of the work streams, which was essentially to do with GDL. It was the SIECA Road User Education Work Group. And she came back with the information and knowledge that we needed. We then put together the programme of training. I then commissioned Dr. Jan Vissers from Royal Haskoning in the Netherlands, who is an eminent traffic psychologist involved in driver training and driver testing, to assess the programme of training and whether or not it met the standard for GDL programme of training in other jurisdictions. And he came back and for the most part was in agreement with it, but highlighted areas where we could improve it. We did that, got it reviewed again. So the programme of training has been developed by us, but peer assessed and considered to be a valid programme of training for GDL.
Just one last one. You mentioned the 12 months versus the 6 months mandatory wait. I think you referenced that it was the view of the Assembly at the time that was what should be go down. I'm just wondering, do you have your own assessment of whether that is still, would it be a preference to have the 12 versus 6 months mandatory wait, or where are you on that?
It's page 3, paragraph 22 on the report, if you wish to review it, for what the committee's view on that was. I'm a civil servant, I'm impartial. We will wait until the evidence of the current system is in place, and maybe at that point we could consider strengthening the provisions within GDL to save even more lives.
Thank you, Chair. Thank you
very much. Andrew, just picking up on what Andrew said, and before I bring Cathal in, 14 modules, Pat, is that right?
14 mandatory modules.
Yep, which is effectively a programme of training. At the end of that, a logbook, perhaps a digital one, is signed off?
It is a digital one, signed off as you go along, rather than at the end. But the final bit then comes back to our system to say that it's complete.
Yep. And that logbook, that digital logbook, can be signed off by a driving instructor or by a parent or guardian?
Supervising driver, yes.
Yep, fine. Cathal.
Thank you, Chair, and thank you very much for your responses so far in your presentation. Obviously, our thoughts are with those who've lost their loved ones on the roads, particularly this year, and obviously the tragedy this week. And I was just thinking back there, Pat, to the time we went through it originally and listening to some of the members' questions. There was no different questions at that time.
Very similar.
It's interesting, the 6 and 12 month thing, because I mean, at the end of the day, those of us who's been around and have gone out and done interviews and witnessed, especially young people being killed on the roads, it's absolutely horrific, and that's why we brought this in the first place, let's be honest. The premise of it all started out, and I certainly do welcome it. Probably, and it's interesting that we got the insight into the legislation, obviously the subordinate legislation, and we'll run it through as a committee. My main question probably is obviously engaging with our partners in getting this all out. Once we've because we need to make them aware now. I know it's been headline news for a couple of days, but getting all those everybody associated with it. So you're planning to roll all of this out in terms of, one, we've got the legislation you mentioned, this board and stuff, but part of the way we get the message out to everybody, this is the way we're going in the future, and engage with all our partners. Any thought to that? What's your plans for that?
The first meeting with the Driving Instructors Association is on the 12th of February, and then we are having monthly meetings with them on the first Thursday of every month, up until the 3rd of September, when we will have 2 meetings, one on the 3rd of September and one on the 24th of September. We're also intending to hold 4 workshops in Belfast, Craigavon, Omagh and Derry. So that's essentially for the driving instructors. In terms of the wider communication piece, we're taking a view that we'll be working with the department and with an external advertising company to develop a bespoke campaign focusing on the key messages of GDL. That will be the broad picture. It'll signpost people to other information sources. We'll also be using institutional information initiatives. Well, that would be the likes of our own NI Direct, a contact centre, social media, the departmental website, but using our own press office then to work with their stakeholders to amplify those messages, so that the message of GDL is as wide as it possibly can. My focus as the SRO in the project over the next 8 months is to win the hearts and minds of people with GDL and make sure that everyone knows that this is coming in and what the issues are. And then, of course, we will have the wider stakeholder engagement. I've just mentioned the driving instructors because they are the key stakeholders. But we are also developing a newsletter for MLAs, which will set out the key messages. So that MLAs can leave that in their constituency office, so that questions that come in from their constituents can be answered in their office, as opposed by other means. And then, of course, we're having engagement with our other road safety partners to amplify the messages through their outreach platforms, including where young people meet, etc. So. And that's broadly speaking, that's the communications plan for the next 8 months.
And that's the important thing. It's the buy-in. Just one other point, and the chair will be happy he's getting the newsletter. I would have changed the title of that, but he'd be happy getting the newsletter. See, in terms of the insurers, and I mean, I know that some companies and services have been offered down through the years in terms of monitoring young drivers and looking at the insurance and the driver behaviour and all that. And I know it's a difficult one for us because we've had insurers in the past. It's just obviously, Stephen mentioned the affordability thing and everything else. Obviously, we're going to have to try some way, have a conversation. I'm not saying it's outside the legislation and everything else, but it's a broader discussion. But I do welcome the piece of trying to get the buy-in and all that, because collectively we're responsibility to do all that, and that should form part of the conversation as well. Even.
Well, we'll be meeting with the Association of British Insurers next week to explain to them what GDL is, what the measures are, how we're going to introduce it. It'll be up to them to decide whether or not that'll have an impact on policy. This afternoon I'm in a meeting with police and crime commissioners in GB who are interested in understanding GDL a bit better. So the message is out there and people are interested in it and they want to hear it, and we will be doing our best to promote that.
Thanks, Chair.
Thank you very much. Cathal, that's great. I'll pick up on Cathal's newsletter jibe towards me, and just for...
He mentions Chair.
I always enjoy a newsletter. Gentlemen, prior to... and it's a comms issue, so just following on from what Cathal said there. Prior to Tuesday morning, I'm going to read out a list of stakeholders, and you can tell me, did any of them know about this before Tuesday morning? So, PSNI, driving instructors, wait till they're finished. This committee, the Assembly, the Road Safety Partnership, or insurance companies. Prior to Tuesday morning, did you engage directly with any of those to let them know that this was coming?
I didn't get a chance to write down because I was listening.
PSNI, Driving Instructors Committee, Assembly, Road Safety Partnership, or insurance companies?
I mean, this is an issue that, Chair, I mean, I know that there was an urgent AQ in the Assembly about this, and the Minister did deal with this, and she did say that this was getting into the political, so I'm conscious of the background that I am to this.
Nothing political about it. I'm just wondering who was there any engagement on it before?
So the introduction of GDL was something that the Minister had said that she was intending to do as soon as possible. So that was a matter of public information. So all of the people that you listed would be aware of this to the degree to which each individual. Certainly, that I'm just conscious into potentially political territory. Certainly the Minister said she thought it was political when she was in the Assembly. But yes, this was a matter of public statement by the Minister that she was intending on bringing in graduated driver licensing as soon as possible. So,
unless I'm mistaken, apart from AQs, which are publicly, obviously public information, the only reference she's ever made to this was in a response to Peter in June, before I was on this committee, about her intention I can't remember the exact phrases, but it is on Hansard. That's not my question. My question was, before Tuesday morning, had you any direct engagement regarding GDL with the PSNI, driving instructors, or NIAC, this committee, the Assembly, the Road Safety Partnership, or insurance companies?
So the Road Safety Forum, the PSNI sit on it. So I mean, it's one of those things where so PSNI would certainly have been aware. Driving instructors would have been aware.
Driving instructors wouldn't have been aware for the 1st of October.
Not for the date, but off the date. So we're not talking about the date.
We're not talking about the date.
We're talking about the concept of graduated driver licensing.
Who actually knew this was coming before Tuesday morning off that list that I've read out to you?
So the PSNI would have done, driving instructors would have done, they were involved in the development of the legislation. The Minister mentioned...
No, I'm conscious the legislation was obviously 10 years ago. I'll make it more specific. Of that list, who had you conversations with that you can evidence over the last 6 months that the Minister was going to do this?
The committee was in the Hansard. The PSNI, we've covered... driving
they were aware.
They're aware that we're bringing in graduated driver licenses, absolutely, and they're very supportive of it. So completely, yes.
Okay.
Who else had you there?
Driver instructors.
You had
driving. The chair of NIAC.
Yep.
Would have been aware because our press office asked us to contact them for them to be interviewed by the BBC as part of their piece.
When would that have happened? Roughly a week before, a couple of days before.
The Friday before.
But they wouldn't have known.
Okay.
Right?
But not at that stage. It was for them to be interviewed about the piece.
Okay, we know about the committee and the Assembly. Road Safety Partnership. Road Safety Partnership is infrastructure, DOJ, PSNI, and the courts and tribunal.
Yeah, the Road Safety Partnership looks specifically, so the department is, and it's one of my team who sits on it, so the department it specifically looks at the location of speeding devices. So Sam Donaldson, who was aware of that, would be on that. I'm not sure if it's ever come up because I don't particularly attend, but that would not have a direct impact on any of the remit of the Road Safety Partnership. So I'm not sure if it was ever covered with them.
Okay, no, that's fine. Insurance companies.
Insurance companies had met the minister, and were aware that graduated driver license in general. Whether it happened in the previous 6 months, I wouldn't know, but they know and are very supportive of the graduated driver licenses being in. As I said, they're aware of any road safety initiatives that we are bringing into Northern Ireland.
That's fine. Thank you very much. Militia.
Okay. Fáilte Rómh, Alig and Sean Hughes are all very welcome here today. And I have to say as well too that I'm really impressed by your answers so far on many of the aspects that have been covered in this discussion and the questions that's been raised by our MLAs. I'm a wee bit disappointed just that the chair's putting such emphasis on the when and where, we'll say, announcements and that were made or when other people were involved in them. and that it distracts away from what I think is a really, really good news story in every respect. And it's a good news story in particular for the safety of all road users. In addition, I have to say too that my colleague Cahill, he just stole my thunder in a sense, because I was going to actually ask that question in relation to the informing the general public, because already since the time of its announcement and its discussion in Parliament itself, there's been lots of what I'd call fake news or rumours in relation to the graduated driving licence. So that, as I say, that was a question that you have already sort of answered there. But in addition to that, in particular, you also alluded then in your presentation to thus far to the rural dimension and the very fact that in some rural areas they don't have access and that to motorways and the likes of it. So are there other elements that have to be considered there, in particular for those that live within, we'll say, rural areas, and that where for young people, whenever they would get their license and so on, they might have various tasks to do there that might inhibit them, in particular when they live within a rural area.
The benefit, Melissa, for the rural community, I think, is far outweighs that of the urban situation, where we have seen in recent years that the number of particularly young people who are involved in collisions that result in someone who dies or is seriously injured is 3 times that which occurs on an urban road. So the programme of training is set generically for all new drivers so that they all get the experience that they need. However, in a rural setting, we will also be able to test, and driving instructors will be able to instruct up to the posted speed. And in the posted speed for national roads, it's up to 60 miles per hour. Now, that's a limit, it's not a target, and it's only if the conditions are favourable that you would do that, or we would test to that. But the factors that are involved in the programme of training addresses the urban and the rural, and whether you're based in a city or based in a rural environment, the programme of training will be suitable for everyone.
That's good to know. And the comment that you make in relation to speed, and I think that is exactly sort of one of our major problems in terms of road safety, and in particular in the rural areas where people make this assumption that whenever they're on a road that it's all 60 miles an hour, whereas in fact it should be a much more reduced limit. In fact, that's a policy that has already been adopted again in the Republic of Ireland, that you'll see that there they do have restrictions on rural roads and so on. In addition, they now too are considering implementing 30 kilometres an hour, which is roughly about maybe 20 miles an hour within Dublin city itself. And I look forward to the days we move in that direction here too in the north as well. But again too, to welcome the work that you as officials and that have done to date and bringing to the fore the graduated driving licence. Gormaga.
Thank you, Melissa. Justin.
Thank you, Chair. Thank you, folks. I guess firstly, my heart goes out to all the families who have lost loved ones on our roads, and for whom this legislation might be coming stalled, and delayed legislation might be coming a little bit too late. And I concur with Melissa. Any legislation that is enacted that helps save lives has to be welcomed and warmly supported. And I congratulate the Minister, and I give the Minister a hard time on multiple fronts, but I congratulate and applaud the Minister for taking up the reins on this stalled and delayed legislation. It's very, very welcome, that it will hopefully help to save lives. And also supporting what Melissa said, it's very reassuring to know that officials are so over the detail and are so sure-footed, despite tough questioning from this committee. It's reassuring that officials are so over the detail. Insurance prices are crippling for young people. and it's been mentioned a number of times already, and you did say that you're going to be meeting with the Association of British Insurers. The personal injury discount rate as set by the government actuary, will you be consulting with the government actuaries department to ensure that the personal injury discount rate, which probably tilts the price of insurance higher here than elsewhere on these islands, is that going to be impacted by this legislation?
So and I haven't prepared in the detail for a question about of that specificness, as it wouldn't impact directly on graduated driver licensing. There is a task force, an insurance task force, which is led on behalf of the executive by the Minister of Finance, and our minister sits on that. It's looking at a wide range of insurance issues. And I'm sorry, I don't have all that detail just straight to my head, but I'm aware. So that is an issue which is being dealt with as a standalone issue. Did you know? You know. So I'm sorry, I don't have any specific detail on that. Insurers, whenever we talk to them, tend to look at the the number of collisions. As that. I'm sorry, I don't have more detail on that.
Young people often don't know what's good for them, and a lot of them will be saying, "Oh, damn this legislation! I can't get my armpits off after
Yes.
So. But if there's a win in it for them, if they know here your insurance is way reduced because of this legislation being brought forward, surely that's something that's a huge selling point for them.
The evidence is from Wales. We're not through that, but just by reducing collisions, insurance premiums drop. That was by a different mechanism, which was the speed, but the collisions went down, the insurance premiums went down. So.
You've mentioned obviously the consultation conducted in advance of the 2016 legislation. To what degree is that now outdated or potentially obsolete, given the changes in technology, changes in driver behaviour, changes in cars and the nature of our roads? Is there any obsolescence as a consequence of the time delay?
We actually reviewed the consultation, and we screened them again and found that there was no requirement to do a further consultation. Regardless of some of those things that you've just mentioned, the process would have been the same.
And so we're in we're a decade on from the Act, but it is an Act, so it is an expression of the will of the Assembly, which is precisely written and is there. So therefore, that is what we enact. So the consultation that fed up that. Now, but on your point about the world changing, I mean, there are other road safety initiatives that the Minister has published in the Road Safety Action Plan, which are exactly to try and bring things more up to date. So there's work on mobile phones. She's given a commitment to work on drink driving. There's the speeding review, which is to pick up Melicia's point about looking at the speed limits on rural roads and that. So in general, looking at 20 miles an hour. There is a consultation going to be launched on drug driving. So those are all right now issues, and those are addressing sort of the fact that the world has moved on. PSNI are reporting that drug driving is as prevalent, if not more, than drink driving. We're going to do something about all those issues. So those broader road safety issues, which fall within my remit, and I hope in due course to see the committee again about, they're also being progressed in this year. But the 2016 Act is what it is because it's a statement of the will of the Assembly, which we're then doing while doing lots of other things to try and save basically every life we can.
And if I could just clarify my answer, when I was referring to the consultation, it was for the second consultation that was done on how the programme of training would be implemented, and the consultation on the changes to the practical driving test, which were subsequent to the Act being passed. So that was the second consultation, which was on the outworkings, which then informed the work that Adrian has done on the SL1s.
Okay, listen, thank you. Good luck with saving lives, folks. Well done. Thank you.
Thank you, Justin. John, you're coming in virtually. The floor is yours, brother.
Thank you very much, Chair and Committee, and gentlemen, for your presentation. And apologies for not being there in person. And I just want to echo the other committee members' comments about our thoughts going out to the loved ones and everyone who's lost their lives on our roads this year and before. I think everything that we can do should be done, and to that end I welcome that. Apologies if I do cover something that maybe has been asked before, because I did miss the first two sections of questioning. I can get logged on time, but it's just following on from the Chair's point. This isn't a political point, it was more just around that engagement piece, gents, around the timing, the announcement, and the lack of engagement with the sectors prior to that. I'm not getting personal around being not given a heads up, because obviously we need the legislation to be passed, but do you think it might have been more beneficial to bring people along and to raise awareness among the sector, particularly driving instructors, that they had the heads up around this time frame of October, and would it been more beneficial to have got them on board so that they were aware of what needed to be done? Or are you content that the time frame between now and October is enough time to do everything they need to do?
If I could start, Mr. Stewart, I believe that the time frame that we have is sufficient for us to do what we need to do, and I've just set out the programme of engagement with the driving instructor stakeholder group from now until October, when the measures will be introduced, and we're confident that that engagement will continue. I have a team that works exclusively with driving instructors in the DVA. And we're in regular contact with them on a number of matters. This will just be another one that they will be able to contact us on, although what we're trying to do is something more structured, but we need to be flexible with that stakeholder group, given that they are very often own operators and their time is quite precious, to try and work with them and be as flexible as we possibly can with them, so that they have all the information that they need in preparation for the introduction of GDL on the 1st of October.
And to that end, and again, apologies if it's been covered, can you just outline what it is you'd expect driving instructors to undertake in terms of the additional training and any potential cost for that, or do you anticipate any cost for that?
Well, we don't anticipate any additional cost in terms of the cost of lessons that they currently charge. The programme of training will change what they're doing in an unstructured way into a structured way, and it'll also help the driving instructor in that whenever the candidate completes the modules of training, that they will be more confident in the candidate's capability and ability to do the driving test, and potentially with a better outcome.
Okay. To that end, though, I mean, there are obviously, it sounds to me like there's going to be more lessons required over a prolonged period for an individual who's learned to drive with their said driving instructor. That is correct, isn't it?
People learn at different speeds, but what we want to do is we want to move away from someone being technically competent to drive a car from A to B to be able to drive a car safely from A to B, and understand the other human factors that are in operation in the environment around them, so that they can react better when presented with a situation which may result in a collision, a death, or a serious injury.
And just to pick up there, I think you were alluding as well to whether all this had to be done through an approved driving instructor. It can be done with a supervising driver as well, so it doesn't mean that you're obliged to use an ADI.
Okay, so there's no concern then among yourselves at this stage, or concern among the sector, that there might be pressure on the capacity of the sector to provide the necessary lessons, and ergo maybe lead to additional costs for people learning to drive. There's no worry at this stage that there isn't the bandwidth within the sector to cope with this.
We're confident that the sector is resourced to absorb GDL. We've heard nothing from the sector to indicate anything to the contrary. But if you even think about the current system of driving, I think roughly 95% of people who present for a driving test present with an ADI. They learn with an ADI, but they supplement that learning with a supervising driver, usually a parent or a guardian. And I would say, if you ever want to destroy the relationship with your daughter, try and teach them how to drive. So that would continue, except they will also be able to do the programme of training with them.
Okay, that's good to know. Just two more points then. It's around the potential exemptions to this, and obviously there'll be people for a variety of reasons that may wish to seek exemptions. What's the pathway for that, and when will people be able to engage in that process?
They'll be able to engage in the process from the 1st of October, because GDL comes in on the 1st of October. The exemption will be from the mandatory minimum learning period. They will still have to complete the programme of training and the logbook to show that they have completed the training. That will be for carers, people who are in receipt of carers allowance. We have already been engaging with the Department for Communities, and where someone comes to us with a request to be exempt from the mandatory minimum learning period, we will be checking their entitlement for carers allowance with the Department for Communities, and only upon confirmation that they are in receipt of that entitlement will we then exempt them from it. There is another exemption, and that exemption is for is a military exemption, that the military is exempt. Now, we don't think that we're going to apply that in Northern Ireland now, and that's because the military have centralised their training in GB. And so we don't believe that that's going to be one of the exemptions that we're going to have to use because of that decision by the Ministry of Defence.
Okay, well, it's really topical that you brought that up, because while I appreciate and know that having done military driving courses in England and Wales, that it's centralised there, often though young drivers who may have passed out through the advanced driving scheme through the military may well be drivers bringing passengers over to Northern Ireland for training on the ranges, for example. So they may well be carrying passengers after 11 o'clock within that 6-month period. If that is the case, would there be an exemption for them in place, or would they have to apply for that?
No, if they would pass the exam in GB, so they would have a GB licence, and the GB licence is not covered by GDL Northern Ireland. This is a Northern Ireland scheme.
Okay, but if they were Northern Ireland residents like myself, though, who'd gone over and came back, is what I'm saying.
If they were a Northern Ireland resident, had a GB licence, passed, then transferred that licence to a Northern Ireland licence, it would be a Northern Ireland licence without the exemptions. Sorry, without the restrictions. I beg your pardon. Yeah.
I'm sorry for getting the minutiae of this, by the way, but it's one of the questions I have been asked.
Really, but you're testing me.
Well, and if I just might add as well,
that's why you zoomed in, John. That's why you zoomed in.
The UK launched a road safety strategy there, I think on the 7th of January. That covers England and Wales, and in that they are going to do a consultation, if I recall correctly, on similar aspects, but not graduated drivers, but similar aspects. So they will be looking at this particular thing, and a lot driven by a particular tragedy in Wales, which I think a lot of members will recall. So they're looking at this at a similar thing. They're just, we're at the implementation stage, and they're doing a consultation on it. So
no problem. Just one more final point, Chair, if I may. I think the idea of the newsletter will be very beneficial, obviously, when this came out, because we were, even though we knew it would come at some stage, caught in the hop a little bit, so we could ask a heck of a lot of questions. I know a lot of AQWs are going in, but the FAQ page on your website is proving very helpful. Can that be live updated as AQs, for example, or AQWs are answered on very niche matters in advance of a newsletter being published with all the details for representatives and people concerned or interested?
Yeah, because this is a campaign page, we've got more flexibility with the campaign page to put FAQs onto our internet site, as opposed to some of the other tight restrictions that are applied to any directing the information we apply. So as questions come in and as niche issues come in and we address those, then they of course will be added to that. So that'll be live.
Excellent. Okay. Well, thank you very much. Appreciate it. No doubt we'll as this process moves on. And again, apologies for not being with you in person. Thank you, Chair.
Okay. Good to see you, John. I'll just pick up one issue just in terms of what John was talking about there, and I think that's probably you guys will be free after that, which would be a large sigh of relief, I'm sure. And it's around costs. So at the moment, as Pat, you were mentioning there about how young people learn to drive. I think you actually quoted a figure on the way through there about how many use family members, how many use driving instructors. Do you want to give that back to me?
Yeah, this is from tests. So we're looking at whenever someone presents for tests, so that we estimate that around 90-95% of anyone who presents for tests presents with an ADI.
Yeah. Okay, that's fine. So, I mean, would you accept that in terms of how new drivers prepare for their test, there's a mixed model of some of them, as you said, using their father or mother to teach them to drive. Some will use their mum or dad plus a driving instructor and mix it around. Some might just use a driving instructor the whole time. am I fair so far in terms of that that representation?
Yeah.
Okay. So in terms of the additional 14 modules, and I'm thinking particularly of kind of, because learning to drive can be expensive, and some parents will probably take the view, I'm going to teach my son or daughter to drive, and I'm going to use some driving lessons because of that expertise that they bring to the picture. But for working families, it can be a very, very expensive process, and that's just the learning to drive, not even the insurance or buying the car. So is it your view that the 14 modules, the additional modules, that there may be a view from some parents that they'll need additional support in that, and they'll have to, or their thinking would be, they'll need more driving lessons? Is that fair enough?
They're not additional modules. The programme of training puts a structure to driving, and it brings into sharp focus the human factors of learning to drive as opposed to just the technical factors. So at the end of that, you've got a learner driver who is more competent technically and more competent within their own selves as to the behaviours of learning to drive, and also of other vulnerable road users and other road users. Everyone learns at a different speed, and I don't know if it's going to take more lessons or not, but what I would imagine is that during the course of learning to drive, people will absorb this information and be better prepared for the driving test. We'll not know until we've done GDL for maybe a year or two, and we go back and check it against the baseline. So the GDL monitoring report that you'll be familiar with, that's produced every year, we'll be able to use that as the baseline against which we can measure some of these outputs.
That's great. Okay. Nobody else has indicated to me. So I want to thank Adrian, Chris and Pat for their time today and coming to the committee and answering questions. It's been really useful for us. Maybe less useful for you. But it's good that you were here. And I'm sure a lot of people have been watching this just to learn this additional information you're able to provide today. So listen, thank you very much.
Thank you.
Thank you. Thank you, members.
Oh no, we're breaking, baby. Breaking, baby. A little power coursing. Okay, so is there anything flowed out of that anyone wanted to ask anything additional on, or any? I think it was very useful, very detailed. Okay, members are content. Folks, that was an hour and 50. I suggest we just take 5 minutes and then we'll and breathe. We're going to take 5 minutes. We're going to suspend committee for 5 minutes, and then we're going to come back to item 8, which will not take quite so long, I hope, which is planning decisions and the Rains presentation. If members are content, we'll take a break.
Committee Room 29. Sound. 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 Committee Room 29, 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 Sound.
Okay, welcome back to Infrastructure Committee. Apologies just for that short comfort break. We are moving on to item 8, which is a raised paper. It's great to have Susie back at committee, and just for members, we're at page 189 for the clerk's memo on planning, which is what this raised paper is on, and at page 191 in terms of the briefing paper. And I am just going to invite Susie to make an opening statement and then possibly some questions.
Okay, thank you, Chair. I will try and keep this brief. So just by way of just a bit of an introduction, this paper was prepared in response to committee's request for a comparison of planning decision times across the UK and Ireland. So it provides an overview of Northern Ireland's current performance, a comparison with England, Scotland, Wales and Ireland, which I will explain was quite difficult to do. And on that basis, caveats were made throughout the paper, explaining why direct comparison with the statistics explored is difficult. And then finally, just some recent policy developments in other jurisdictions. So by way of context, in section 2, it looks at Northern Ireland decision times, and that's on page 191. The Northern Ireland Audit Office reports that Northern Ireland's planning system appears slower than other jurisdictions. Statutory performance indicators are 15 weeks for minor applications and 30 weeks for major applications. Latest annual figures for 2024-25 show that minor applications take an average of 19 weeks, which is over the target, and 3 of the 11 councils met this target. For major applications, the average is 39.6 weeks, again over the target. However, this is showing improvement. It's the lowest since the transfer of powers, and 5 councils have met this target. In terms of regionally significant developments, all 5 live cases exceeded the 30-week target. And just overall, the number of applications received dropped by 3% compared to previous year. This compares to pre-reform figures from 2014-15, when both minor and major applications were processed around 3 weeks faster. And however, volumes were significantly higher then in terms of application numbers received. More recent quarterly data from 2025 shows that major applications continue to show improvement in terms of the decision times taken, and local applications remain around the same. Application numbers do continue to fall quarter on quarter. Page 194 of the paper provides just some questions in relation to this that members might find of interest for further consideration, and they're there just for you to read at your leisure. I'll not go into those just right now. Section 3 then compares Northern Ireland with other jurisdictions. 3.1 lists some of the caveats in terms of the complexities in making these direct comparisons. Main reason being that jurisdictions use different reporting periods, targets, definitions such as decision time versus processing times, calculation methods, mean versus median for their averages. Some provide percentages within the target that's met versus the average time, and a lot of these are provided in weeks and some in days. Starting points in terms of date received versus date validated, where date validated is when all required documents that accompany an application is received. England and Ireland report only the percentage of decisions made within their target and not the average weeks taken that we can see within Northern Ireland and some of the other jurisdictions. On that point, similar to Northern Ireland, Wales and Scotland report both percentages and averages, which seem more comparable on the surface, but use different methodologies, making comparison difficult. And the paper just explains that in a bit more detail, and I did have to go back through my GCSE maths to understand some of this stuff. So apologies for some of my crude descriptions here at the moment. In way of just a summary of the main comparisons, Table 1 provides that, and I'll just refer to that. That's on page 198 of your pack. So just very briefly and crudely, targets for minor or local applications. In Northern Ireland, the targets are longer than other jurisdictions. Our targets are 15 weeks. In England, Wales and Ireland, it's 8 weeks. And in Scotland, they record it as 2 months. The same with major applications. Here, we're 30 weeks. In England, it's 13 weeks. And in Wales and Ireland, it's also 8 weeks, which is similar and the same as their minor target. So just moving on then to the actual performance overview. In terms of the percentage of decisions made within targets, now I referred to that before, there's two sort of figures. There's the percentage of targets made within the target, and then there's the average processing time that's taken in weeks. And not all jurisdictions provide both of these figures. So in terms of the percentage of decisions made within targets, Northern Ireland and England show that most of their decisions exceed their targets on a percentage basis. Scotland, Wales and Ireland appear to be better. In terms of the average processing times, Northern Ireland are generally longer than Scotland and Wales. And I'll just show this. Northern Ireland has 19 weeks on average for minor applications, 39.6 weeks for major. However, Scotland is 11.8 weeks for minor and 30 to 37 weeks for major, and Wales is 16 weeks. But however, this is combined with their major and minor all into one figure. Ireland and England don't appear to provide similar figures in the reports on the average weekly length of time it takes, though the UK government estimated in 2024 that it takes an average of 28 weeks to determine their major applications in England. So you can compare that to ours of the 39.6 weeks. In terms of regionally or nationally significant projects, just there's different categorisation and terminology used across jurisdictions. Again, this is hardest to compare due to the different systems, the categorisation and the lack of comparable data. However, some of the main headlines, in terms of our regionally significant development, all of ours are over the 30-week target. In Ireland, their strategic infrastructure development takes an average of 53 weeks. In England, their national strategic infrastructure projects, the government expects 17 months, but many exceed this. Apologies, just till I get to the top of my page. In Scotland, large energy infrastructure can take up to 4 years. And in Wales, the developments of national significance are just within their 36 weeks target for 22 and 23. However, Wales has undergone change in December 2025, where they've replaced their old system by a new significant infrastructure projects. And this is similar to the system in England. And there's more detail on that in the last section of the paper. Some of the key observations are provided then in section 4, and this is on page 204 of the paper. So the Northern Ireland Statistical Bulletin reports decision times against statutory targets within the Local Government Performance Indicators and Standards Order 2015. Other jurisdictions, however, report against targets from their respective pieces of planning legislation. And just by way of an example, in England, these are the same as their local government performance indicators for planning. It may be worth clarifying whether specific statutory decision targets for applications are provided under Northern Ireland planning legislation, and if so, whether these align with the performance indicators used in the statistical reporting. Under Article 20 of the Planning General Development Order, 2015, Councils must notify applicants of decisions within 8 weeks for minor applications and 13 weeks for major applications. If this does not occur, applicants may appeal directly to the Planning Appeals Commission. The committee may wish to seek clarity from the department on the difference between councils operating to longer performance targets compared to statutory decision periods that may trigger an appeal, particularly the impact on the overall system in terms of appeal rates and PAC workload. The performance targets or indicators used in the statistical bulletins were agreed in 2014/15 during consideration of the local government order, and members may wish for more information on how these targets were developed. In terms of validation versus receipts of applications, so that the starting point of whenever the decision times are recorded, Northern Ireland targets, as used in the statistical report, start from the date valid compared to a date received that some of the other jurisdictions refer to. Members may wish to seek clarity on whether there's a time between application receipt and validation, and whether the current target captures the full process. Final section of the paper, starting on page 206, looks at some recent policy developments in other jurisdictions. I'll not go into these in an awful lot of detail, but in England, their NSIP reforms, so their significant infrastructure projects, introduced a number of methods to try and reduce delays. This include enhanced pre-application process, shorter notification periods, and a fast-track route. The Planning and Infrastructure Act in 2025 received royal assent in December to modernise decision-making and reduce judicial review routes. In Wales, the Infrastructure Wales Act 2024 introduces a new significant infrastructure projects regime, known as a one-stop shop for consents, and similar to the regime in England, where many major projects will move outside the planning system. In Scotland, major reforms to the electricity infrastructure consenting under the Planning and Infrastructure Act 2025 introduced mandatory pre-application processes and streamlined inquiry processes. Consultation is currently underway to raising the 50 megawatt threshold for local authority determinations. In Ireland, major legislative overhaul under the Planning and Development Act 2025, with a new commission replacing Anne Board Planella. New decision-making relevant period will also come into action once fully commenced. So just in closing, other UK and Irish jurisdictions also report performance against their statutory or their policy-based targets. However, categorisations, targets and methods of calculation differ, and this means comparisons are not straightforward and must be made cautiously. Other jurisdictions have undergone or are undergoing reform to help speed up their planning system and decision-making processes. Northern Ireland's current performance framework was passed nearly 10 years ago and appears to provide for longer decision timeframes compared to other jurisdictions. Therefore, it may be worth considering whether Northern Ireland's current performance framework remains appropriate and whether there is scope and intent to revise and update it and any associated targets. So that's finished for now, and if there's any questions, of course, I'm happy to discuss anything with members.
That's great. Thank you very much, Susie. Great paper, great presentation, and thank you so much for coming along today. I've got some specific ones. I'll start off with just some of the stuff you talked about there, just in closing. You were summarising there that England have got a significant infrastructure projects body. Wales underwent reform in 2025. The Republic of Ireland have the Planning Development Act 2025, if I'm right so far, and all of these work to effectively speed up their planning system. I completely take the point that everyone has to do better, I think, and the comparatives are difficult given the various systems. But would you accept that the rest of the UK and Ireland generally are doing something would it be fair to say that the rest of the UK and Ireland are generally doing something about their planning system, and they're doing it quite recently?
It certainly would appear that way with the recent changes. I mean, we're also undergoing a number of review processes. It's just to see then what comes off the back of that from the department.
Yeah. Okay, that's fine. Just taking you through a little bit of the written evidence that you had on your paper there. Paragraph, number 2, it's decision times in Northern Ireland. Just at the end of that, you said there, the Northern Ireland Audit Office report, which I think was 2022, is that right? Yep. And so I actually had a look. You had a very useful hyperlink, so I followed through, and I have it here on part 4 in terms of departmental oversight. The Audit Office said, I'll just quote, and albeit this is 3 years old, of the 3 regionally significant pending applications at 31 March 2021, 2 of these have been in the system for more than 3 years. And the Audit Office says, given the economic significance of these projects, and these are the regionally significant ones, given the significance of these projects, any delay is likely to have a negative impact on potential investment. And those are the big projects. I mean, would you agree with that assessment, that actually the longer it takes us to progress the regionally significant projects, that actually the more negative an effect that has on our economy?
I mean, that's honestly not for me to say, but any delay within the planning system certainly feeds into the system for capital projects, and no Des has been up and speaking to you, so yep. And it has been highlighted as an issue on a number of reports.
Yep. If I'm right, in terms of the major projects, it's actually better than it was. In terms of planning, it's actually those targets. Am I right in saying it's the major projects is actually better than it has been?
That's right. They're certainly showing they're coming down in numbers, especially the latest ones. The last quarters are down to like 30 and 34 weeks. So it'll be interesting to see over the course of 2025 now what that will average out at. My comparisons that I've looked at have been an annual basis, because there naturally can be fluctuations throughout the different quarters.
Yep.
Yeah.
Okay. You also mentioned just in your oral evidence that application numbers are falling. Do you think that there's some correlation between, or could there be a correlation between the falling the falling processing time for major applications and the fact that there are generally less applications in the system? Is there a possibility that those could correlate?
That is certainly a good question, and it's something that I would think you'd want to maybe ask the department.
Yep, okay.
I haven't come across anything specific that I can reference to that,
right.
But it would be useful to find out from the department.
I think so, yeah. I might have one more, but I'm conscious I'm going to let other folks come in. I'll just come back at the end. That's great. Thank you. Cathal, you're first up.
Thanks, Chair. And Susie, you're welcome back. We've been at this a long time, obviously. I mean, thanks for the figures. I mean, I was just looking back there to see 2011 when we done the Act and everything else. But probably my main question is, and I mean, it's, I know you've done all the stats. The issue for us, we transferred the powers down, and there's question marks over, you know, it's all right having your own autonomy, but was it fit for purpose and all that? And since then, the question that. But just in relation to it, I mean, have you looked at, and maybe it wasn't part of the paper or the briefing, have you looked at the workforce? Is the workforce issue an issue that we've come across? Not only compared with other jurisdictions, but in general, is that a major issue for us, both in major and minor?
In relation to this paper specifically, no, I didn't look at the workforce, but having a look at previous papers, there's been a series of ones where we've looked at the reviews that are have been going on, and that has certainly been one of the elements that has been raised on a number of occasions from a local authority perspective, and the workforce strains. Yeah.
No, and that's it. I know we've made some progress in some places, and you're right, it's hard to quantify there. Just my reading of what you're saying there, you know the way some others break it up into sections, you know, they don't look at it as the number of weeks or anything else you were saying there. How complicated? Why can we use that then if that's the case in terms of figures, or why do you use different methodologies? Say it.
It certainly made the comparisons very difficult. It's when you look at it on the surface, it seems like it should be, comparable, but whenever you drill down into it, you were sort of comparing apples with pears. And there just seems to be a bit of an inconsistency, and it's purely down to the fact that we provide our own statistics and our own targets and framework within our own legislation here.
And just finally, I'm mindful of this because my own council areas, I'm across 2 council areas obviously as a constituency. We've always had this argument where their own autonomy to do their own thing and not be a bit of flexibility. But there's always been an issue of inconsistency right across councils, and you're saying there some councils are better at. Is there any learnings from that? Have you discovered anything how going forward how we can breach that gap or close that gap? Sorry.
Obviously, when we're looking in terms of the legislative side of things, it's the carrot and the stick kind of approach that we're looking at. And I mean, we certainly, in terms of our targets, they are the targets that they must stay within, or that they're to achieve, are longer than anywhere else in the rest of the UK and down south. So we're effectively working to those longer targets, so you would expect then that our actual processing times then would be longer, and it's whether you adopt a more stringent, shorter target period, but then in the practicalities of that, what were those original targets developed on, and that is something that maybe would be of use to find out from the department officials during the conversations back in 2014-15, what those targets were developed on the basis of and why they're so different to other places. I mean, fundamentally we are very different in terms of our governance and structures and the powers that we have, so there is that element, and even just our planning culture here is very different to anywhere else. But even in terms of the inconsistencies between our planning legislation and these indicators that they're using for planning reporting, there's a bit of an inconsistency there, where, for instance, England, it's the same. So the planning legislation has the same targets that are in their planning performance indicators in their local government legislation, whereas ours are different. And you might say that the targets in our planning legislation at the moment, you'd question whether those are actual performance targets. They're essentially the targets that councils must make a decision before an appeal can be made by the applicant. But we don't seem to categorically have the specific targets that maybe other jurisdictions have within the face of the legislation. And that's maybe something that you could get clarification on. The department, the experts would know. Maybe
sorry.
Yeah, go ahead, Colin.
No, because the validation checklist, obviously we hope that, but I remember as part of our conversations, we talked about front loading the system. Remember, put all the information in to start, and then hopefully you'll have a shorter time frame. Does that work? Is that different across different jurisdictions? Have they a different system in terms of, they front loaded more, or is it just, are most of the systems the same right across the board in terms?
Certainly, like the new Infrastructure Act, that seems to be one of the big areas that they're trying to do, is to streamline the pre-application and consultation side of things. So, again, that is interesting because what we were talking about when you're trying to capture decision times, that process comes in from the date received until it's validated, and all required information that accompanies an application is received. And again, there's differences there. So if we are capturing the full process, we're front loading, so there's possibly more time spent there before it becomes an actual official received application that's then measured for the performance.
Far too long here, Chair.
No. Harry?
Thank you very much, Chair, and thank you again. Wonder, could you maybe tell us, with all your research, which council area is the worst for application time targets?
I don't have those figures. They are there, and I can. In fairness, the department does provide that the performance targets across each of the different ones. So I don't have them to hand, but I can get those for you. Yeah, yeah.
Please. And in looking at them, do you think they're doing anything to improve their targets?
The individual councils.
Yeah.
I don't have information on that.
Okay.
In terms of what each individual council is doing. I can just in terms of the strategic approach, maybe.
Yeah. And you mentioned methodology. Like here compared to UK, Scotland, Wales, but actually in Northern Ireland here, do you see much difference in the methodology from council to council?
Again, I haven't looked into the individual councils. I suppose too it gets tricky looking from council to council from here to across the water, because in England, even when you look at their statistics, they divide it up between district councils, and then and they just have a different structure altogether, and some deal with more local level and some are dealing with more regional level. So yeah, it's difficult to compare, but for this paper I didn't go into the specifics of the councils, I'm afraid.
That's okay. Okay, thank you, Chair.
Thank you, Harry. Justin.
Thanks, Chair. Thanks, Susie. Very interesting report with lots of questions, and it's really poor reflection on our planning system here, with quarter-on-quarter reductions in the number of applications, and yet we are still taking 2 or 3 times longer than other parts in these islands to process, given the clock starts later here as well in terms of validation as opposed to receipt. So it doesn't bode well for our planning system. And do you have a sense of that? Why is there a reduction of the applications quarter-on-quarter? Is just because potential applicants have just said, I can't hack this system. It's too much of an obstacle to progress, and why bother?
I don't have the reasons for it, I'm afraid. I mean, we're looking at the quarters at the moment, and I'm sure the department they'll have the knowledge there that I'm sure there is fluctuations and there will be quieter quarters than others. But when you look at the annual figures, there's definitely that figure, 3% for the latest annual figures reduction compared to the year before. But it's certainly something that maybe the officials would have more of a sense of in terms of why they're seeing those reductions.
That's a huge worry economically that's happening quarter on quarter now, and it's quite frightening, I would say. In terms of resourcing and conditions for planning offices, the working environment has to be conducive to optimal performance, and I know that's not the case. Certainly in Uri, where they're in porta cabins and they feel that they're not in an environment which helps them play their best game. And planning, one architect said planning departments are massively under-resourced, demoralised and ill-equipped. And is that a case that's also serving to be a further blockage? The planning system here is in the north. It appears to be a significant impediment to development, and it's holding back housing. It's holding back major infrastructural projects, and that's surely not positive in terms of our economy, in terms of our whole way of moving forward.
Yeah, and I know it's certainly it's across the board as well. There's been reports in terms of planning authorities within England as well suffering the same. So a lot of their planning expertise going maybe into the private sector.
Mm-hmm. Well, here they're just moving south. They're going to Fingal, they're going to DCC, they're going to Monaghan because better paid, less caseload. Makes sense. But that's not your issue.
She was doing well. She wasn't too sure if that was a question, Justin, but she was a seasoned witness in front of committees. You okay, Justin?
Thank you, Susie. Thank you.
Yeah, no,
excellent
thank you,
report,
Justin.
Susie. Thank you very much.
Andrew.
Thank you, Chair. Thank you, Ms. Cave. Just again, very often your research papers are only the tip of the iceberg of the knowledge that you have in this matter. You know, the planning you mentioned when you were you're talking in your oral evidence there that the planning reform prior to planning reform, applications the time taken was shorter, even though there was more applications. And again, as we're discussing, that has inverted now, if that makes sense. Is there an indication of what's causing this? You know, again, as much from other research and not necessarily the paper, but is there an indication of why this is happening? Or
well, I mean, certainly, and the department has said this a number of times too. You know, obviously, when you bring in new processes, there's a time for, you know, things to embed in, and for that process to take time and then become efficient. I mean, we also have had the pandemic, which will have affected those figures during that period of time as well, and in terms of numbers and processing times, and new IT systems as well, and just people getting used to those. And so those are some of the sort of high level reasons that I've come across from the reviews and different things. Whether there's something in more detail that the department could provide, or have heard from councils and more recent, maybe in terms of workforce and change and expertise. I think that's quite a big one.
Thank you, Chair.
Thank you, Andrew. I don't have any other indications at this point, Susie, but I just want to thank you for the really detailed and very useful paper you produced for us. It's not an easy, and you alluded to this in your opening statement, it's not easy comparatively because of the various systems, and I saw that as I read through it. But I think just even the sort of headline stuff that you're able to bring and place into that, and the evidence that you've given today has been really, really useful at a macro level, just looking across other jurisdictions, seeing in general terms where the trends are and what the reasons for that is. So look, thank you very much. We'll see you again in a couple of weeks. Just come back and do it all again for us. Something else. Thank you very much, Susie.
Thank you.
All right, thank you.
Okay, so just staying on 8, I want to just check with members. I've got some things in light of Susie's paper and the evidence that she presented today, some things I think we should write to the department regarding this. So I'll outline what I have here so far, and one is whether there is any intent from the department to revise legislation to improve planning performance times in light, particularly with developments in England, Wales and the Republic of Ireland. And, you know, there's the 3 acts in the last year and a half that those jurisdictions have brought through. I'd like to ask the Minister regarding the NIO report and that line that I quoted in it, which Susie referenced in her written evidence. Does the Minister accept that delays in regionally significant applications is likely to have a negative impact on potential investment? That's verbatim, straight out of the Northern Audit Report, to see if the Minister has her views on that. And the other one is from the briefing paper that Susie produced. So it's on page 3 of that, if any members want to go to it. Second bullet point down. Susie stated of the 5 regionally significant development applications live in the planning system at the end of March 25, all have exceeded the 30-week period, 2 at ministerial recommendation stage, 3 awaiting. And I would like to write to the Minister just regarding that and see if the Minister will give us an update on where those regionally significant development applications are, and when particularly the 2 that are a ministerial stage are going to be decided. I don't think anyone on the committee would dispute that these applications are the bedrock of a lot of our economic development in Northern Ireland. Getting these things through simply create jobs, and they create GVA for our economy. So a lot of these are linked to a whole range of other areas that we want to try and promote in Northern Ireland. That's all I had coming out of that in terms of questions for the department, but I want to make sure other members are covered off here. Justin?
As I said, our planning system here in the north appears to be an impediment to timely and efficient progress in relation to development across various sectors, from housing to significant infrastructure projects. Has the Department for Infrastructure connected with the Department for Economy to see what the economic implications are of delays in our planning system?
That's a good question.
Impediments to development?
Yeah, that's a good question. Actually, yeah.
And what research has been conducted on that front?
Okay, that's fine. Anyone else got anything? Andrew?
Yeah, Chair, no, I think it would be good to write the department just to sort of clarify decisions, on the reduction of applications and, how this is being impacted, and whether or not, it can clarify, applications by quarter, and also just forecasting whether some of the measures are going to make a difference.
Yeah.
Because, we want, there's no point sort of knee jerking if we can see a trend, then what have you, but I think, as Justin said, I mean, it is stark and it is an issue, and no drains, no cranes. Yep.
That's Justin. Yep. Okay. Michael, you've got a summary of that one, okay? Just the last one from Andrew. You have
just the last one, yes. What exactly are we asking the department?
Just to clarify the decisions by quarter, and how many, and what the correlation is, and
I think it's worth noting, and Susie brought this out, and I'll quote it directly. Whilst exceeding the 30-week target, and these are on major applications, this does represent a decrease of 7 weeks compared to the previous year. So that that is positive. That's obviously at a council level. However, it still exceeds the target by a certain amount. So we're certainly not there yet. Harry?
And if I could just also, which council area is the worst, and what are they doing about to improve it, basically?
Yep. Okay, no problem there.
I think, sorry, Chair,
yes.
if I can, I think you'd asked Susie to provide a league
okay,
table.
So, yeah, either
we maybe don't need to write to the...
That's okay.
But if members want to, then...
No. Susie will come back to us, won't she?
That she stated she would, yes.
Yeah.
Sure, we'll keep an eye on
the
that.
worst offenders.
Brilliant.
Yep.
Directors of Planning will be diving for cover that committee session. Okay, I think that's us on that. As long as everyone's happy and content. I'll move on to item 9 then. Wait, sorry, Michael, you okay with all that?
Yes,
do you want committee agreement a right to write, or are you happy enough?
No, it would be good to have.
Are committee happy enough to write along those lines? Yep. Yeah. Okay. See, I'm slowly getting there. Okay. Item 9 is SL1, the key pass and a skill in the Abandonment Order, Northern Ireland 2026. I'll take members to page 212 for the clerk's memo, page 213 for the SL, and pages 216 to 221 for documents that relate to this particular proposal. I need to seek committee agreement to note the receipt of the SL1 and the proposed statutory rule, which will be published as part of the call for views. Also to agree that the SL1 will be considered at the meeting of the 4th of March 2026, and to indicate whether you are content that a briefing form from officials is not required at this stage. Are committee in content? Okay. Item 10, SL1, the Drumnagoon Road, Portadown, Abandonment Order, Northern Ireland 2026. It's at page 223 for the clerk's memo, at 224 for the SL1, and 227 to 232 for documents that relate to this proposal. I need to seek committee agreement to note the receipt of the SL1 and the proposed SR, which will be published as part of the call for views, to agree that the SL1 will be considered at its meeting of March the 4th, and to indicate whether committee is content at this point in time that a briefing from officials is not required. Are members content? Item 11 is SL1, the Malone Road, Belfast Abandonment Order, Northern Ireland 2026. At page 234 is the clerk's memo. At page 235 is the SL1. And pages 238 to 241 are documents in relation to this proposal. I need to seek committee agreement to note the receipt of the SL1 and the proposed SR, which will be published for views, and indicate that the SL1 will be considered at our meeting on the 4th of March 2026, and indicate whether committee is content that a briefing from officials is not required at this point in time. Are members content? Item 12 is SL1, the school's part-time 20 miles per hour speed limit amendment order, Northern Ireland 2026. It is at page 244 for the clerk's memo, at 245 for the SL1, and pages 248 to 261 documents in relation to this proposal. I need to seek committee agreement to note the receipt of this SL1 and the proposed SR, which will be published as part of the call for views, to indicate also that the SL1 will be considered by this committee at its meeting on the 4th of March, and indicate whether you are content that a briefing from officials is not required at this stage. Are you content? Okay. That takes us to Forward Work Programme, which is at page 263. The Forward Work Programme is there. I just need to seek committee agreement to proceed with the evidence sessions as set out in the draft Forward Work Programme and to reflect any decisions taken today. Are committee content? Okay. Item 14 is any other business. Do members have any other business? No. Okay. That takes us to item 15, which is a date, time and location of the next meeting. I need to seek committee agreement for the next meeting to take place at 10 a.m. on Wednesday, the 11th of February, in room 29 in Parliament Buildings. Are committee content? In that case, I will adjourn the meeting.
Committee Room 29, Sound.